Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. This is part 2 in the Build a Website with Gatsby tutorial series. And in this video we're going to move into querying data with GraphQL. If you don't have any familiarity with GraphQL, then you can take a little bit of time to go to say graphql.org and just get a feel for the basics of it. You won't need to know anything going into this video about GraphQL. I'll show you everything you need to know to use it to query your data and use that data in components. And we're just going to look at very basic querying today. So at the end of last video, basically we had a web page that looked like this. It wasn't styled very well. We set it up so that we've got like fast internal linking happening, right? So we see that the querying between pages is pretty quick. Right. And after this, I went ahead and styled up the page a little bit to kind of get us moving forward a little bit quicker so you didn't have to sit through all of that during one of the videos. And if you go to my GitHub repository page and you check out the video 1 branch, this is basically where we left off. This will have all of the code that was used for the last video. All right, but the master branch has been updated. So if you right now I'm checking out the video 1 branch. If you do git checkout master, all right, and I run that, all right, wait for the page to refresh here. All right, you see this is what we jumped to. So all of this styling I did outside of the video. If you want to take your time to see what I did, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, if you just want to start where this is at now, then what you can do is just, of course, clone my my repository and then check out the master branch. All right, so this is where we're going to start from today. And what we'll want to do first is we'll want to add something to our Gatsby config file. So if you check out your Gatsby config file, we really only have plugins enabled. We don't have anything else. But if you go to the Gatsby docs and look at their Gatsby config API documentation, the first thing you'll see here in the configuration options is site metadata. All right, and that tells you just a little bit about how to add some metadata to your site. So we're going to follow this right here and add metadata to our site and then use that data, inject some of it into our HTML to make it render the site title, for example. So if you go into your Gatsby config file and add the site metadata object, and we'll give it title, and you don't really want to keep going with my Gatsby page or my Gatsby site. So let's say that we want to have just a blog where we rant about anything and everything. We can call it some really super cheesy title like unsolicited opinions. All right, and then we'll set the site URL. Now we don't have a URL yet. So, if you set this up through GitHub Pages or Netlify, you can add that URL then. For now, we'll just go with Google's homepage. And then we'll need a description for our site. And this will matter later when we set up SEO for our site, because with a single page application, oftentimes you don't have any, if you use React to build it, oftentimes you don't have any SEO set up, so we'll want to do that later. But that's towards the end of the tutorial series. And I'll say this is my rant blog. All right, and don't forget to add a comma after the site metadata object. All right, so we've updated our Gatsby config file, so let's go ahead and stop our dev server and restart it. Now going back to our home page, we haven't changed anything visually, we've just updated that config file. So now let's say that we want to inject some data from the site metadata object into this H1 heading. Right, so recall your H1 heading here. We had the site title basically hard-coded into it, but then we'll want to query that data from the Gatsby config file and then inject it in. But first, actually, why don't we stop our dev server? If you look up here, right, you've got a link to this, well, you've got a URL here. If we go to that, so click on that. This is to check out the GraphQL data graph. Well, it would help if we actually ran our dev server. Sorry about that. Get a little ahead of myself sometimes. Okay, so here we are. I'm going to erase that. Pretend like you didn't see it. All right, so here we can take a look at what our data graph is going to look like so we can understand exactly how it is we're going to need to query our data, in what shape, and what fields will be available. So to see what's available to you immediately, what you can do is you can just hit shift space, right? And you'll have, say, query, a mutation, subscription, fragment, all that's available. And if you're not familiar with what a query or a mutation is, like I said again, check out graphql.org for a little bit more information on that. But for now, just select query. All right, open up a set of curly braces. Don't worry about this little red mark down here. It'll go away once we start adding things. Now to see what queries are available, you can do, again, shift space. All right, you've got all of this. Basically what we're looking at is site, because that will give us our site metadata. So go ahead and do site. Open up a set of curly braces. Now shift space again. You can see there's the site metadata object. All right, select that. Open up another set of curly braces. And we would expect now to see, if you go back to your Gatsby config file, we would expect to see these three fields: title, site URL, and description. But we have to ask it to give us those field values. So go ahead and shift space again. You can see there's title. And you don't have to do shift space every time. For example, I want to see site URL. I can just type S. And that just made a liar out of me. All right. So you can see site URL pops up. Select that. And then finally, if I select description with D, that'll pop up. So if I hit the run button here, I would expect to see what I saw or what I entered in my Gatsby config file. And I do. I see that I get my title with the proper value. Site URL and description both are giving us the proper values, what we entered in our Gatsby config file. So the good thing with this, or one of the good things about this, is we can use this as our query in our code, and we can just copy and paste it in. And we'll be giving it a name. So you can call this, for example, header query. That's what I'm going to call it. And so for now, go back to your IDE. Go to your header.js file. This is where we created our header in the last video. All right, so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to query that data from the Gatsby config file, the site metadata. All right, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a React component to do that. Now, if you go to querying data in components using static query, you'll see that we have this static query component available to us. And it shows you in the documentation exactly how to use it. And in fact, we're going to use it in exactly this way. All right, so what we can do is we'll need to bring in from Gatsby GraphQL and also static query, the static query component. All right, and we're just going to return that component, and inside that component we're going to use a render prop to render our header. All right, so for now, take your header code. Actually, just comment it out for now. Okay, good. So now what we're going to do is we're going to return our static query component. So grab that. All right, and the first prop we're going to use is the query prop. All right, and you can see just by looking at the documentation page exactly how to use that, right? We're going to use GraphQL. And you can see with GraphQL, you need to enclose the query within backticks. All right, so here, open up a set of backticks. All right, now we've already got our query made out, right? That was on our GraphQL data graph page. So you can just grab all of this and paste that in here. Sorry, I'm a little bit anal about this stuff. All right, so that's the first prop, the query prop, and underneath that we're going to use a render prop. All right, now if you're not familiar with render props, and like I said, one of the prerequisites for this tutorial series was to have a good level of competence with React, but if for some reason it just has always flown under your radar, you can check out what render props are at the React documentation site. And it says basically here, a component with a render prop takes a function that returns a React element. The React element we're going to return is our header, right? All of this HTML code here. And it shows you how to use, simple render prop here in a React component. All right, so what we're going to return here is all of this stuff. So uncomment it, and then just cut it and paste it in. All right, here we go again with me being anal. Sorry about this. Okay. So it looks like we got an error. Where's our error? It says GraphQL is not defined. Ah, okay. So that looks like it'll fix everything. Okay, so if we want to take a look at this data, we can look at it in the console. So as you would do in React, go ahead and open up a set of curly braces so we can use some JavaScript and just console log the data. Alright, so if you look down here, we've got a data object. And you open it up, you see that it is in line with our data query. And it has all of the site metadata that we put in. Alright, so to use that, right, to inject it into our site is not difficult at all, or to inject it into one of our HTML elements. So for example, we want to use it here. Right, we've got the site title hard-coded in, but remember we've changed our site title. It's now Unsolicited Opinions, that terrible title. All right, so we can just inject it in. So open up a set of curly braces, and if you don't remember the shape of the data, just take a look at it here. Right, it's going to be data, which is our overall object, .site metadata .say title, and it is going to be the title. Right, so that's what we can enter here. And if you go back to your page, you can see now we've got our title entered in or updated. Okay, so we've used our GraphQL query successfully. All right, I don't know what I did there, but all right. So back to the code. So this is using the static query header, but if you want to use, if you're a big fan of React hooks, they have a use static query hook. So let's use that instead. So just Control Z until you get rid of all of this stuff. Okay, good. So now we'll want to use the use static query hook. And of course, Gatsby has very good documentation for using that as well. And so again, you'll import GraphQL, and this time use static query. Okay, and then this time, you can just say, you can use the hook directly, and it takes in GraphQL, and you'll have to add in those backticks. Okay, now again, we've already got our query made out here, so we can just copy and paste it in. So if we take a look at our page, just to make sure we don't have any obvious errors. Okay. We want to see what that data looks like in our console. So again, we can just use console log. And this time, we can just do that right after the data object was defined. So you go back over to your console and you see you've got your data object here, site metadata, and then all of those fields that we created here. So that's working for us. Okay, so using it is quite straightforward. So again, just get rid of that hard-coded site title. Wasn't supposed to do that. And actually we need to call data first. Alright, and we see that we are again injecting that title from our metadata into our H1 heading. Alright, so that's it. That's a simple use of GraphQL to get data and then use it in your website, in one of the pages of your website, or use it in a component. So again, we've just touched on things very briefly. If you want to take a deeper dive into GraphQL, you can always go to graphql.org or How to GraphQL. They give you quite a bit of information that's pretty easy to follow. Now, the one thing about GraphQL that I'll say is, with Gatsby, they've already taken care of all of the setup with GraphQL. You just need to follow the way that they use their queries, and you'll be good. But if you're building a full stack application using GraphQL, building out the back end takes a lot of work. So if you're interested in learning how to do that, I have a video series. See if I can find it here. Yes, it's the full stack Apollo GraphQL tutorial, and it'll take you all the way through building a full stack GraphQL application using Apollo server and Apollo client. So again, if you're interested, please check it out. And as always, thank you for joining me. In the next video, we'll do some more advanced data queries. We'll actually create data for our site and query it from its folder. So again, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.